Sheila here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and uh, I have a eureka. When we talk about the Genghis Khan wars, the methods that they used for psychological warfare were very much like Epstein ring. They would basically use chaos magic in a particular way, because chaos magic just means eclectic magic. And what I'm going to say would be the one thing that would make the difference between being able to use chaos magic without that being harmful, or without that to backfiring, without chaos magic backfiring, or basically use of chaos magic in a way that gets definitely tries to get a new order out of chaos, but backfires and flops and creates all kinds of things that are very, very, very unwanted. What I'm going to say is also going to negate the infiltration of the Epstein ring, and all the way back to how the Mongol Empire hacked people. The Mongol Empire was prosperous where people raped one another, because then you can besiege a city and as not so much backlash or impediment on the frequency of the ecosystem, what people call karma, for completely ravishing, completely assassinating the city if people that support rape don't give in to another regime. Now, one of the things that is necessary for such infiltration is that people will think that that they can make any choice that can lead to them being raped, whether it's justified or not. Now, this is something incredibly scary, because at first one can feel incredibly helpless. They can feel like they have no control over the situation. But it's actually acknowledging that rape is not the bad choices of a person, other than the person that raped, that is the source of self-trust, regeneration, and healthy boundaries. If I grew up in a society, for example, when I was a young child, uh, sometimes my mother would be afraid that I would wear, I don't know, later she worked at she was a fashion designer, um, and she was completely blocked. Now I understand it's because she did not join the Epsteins. Only now I think about it. She has a 10th house Libra with Neptune in it. Um, Very good sense of style, sometimes toxic. And then naturally, I was the daughter, so naturally I would be the model. So she would be afraid that certain things invite predators and so on and so forth. That was something that was toxic. It actually made me more susceptible. Because if she would have had the notion that nothing invites that, nobody has the right whatever, then paradoxically, that would make it more frictional. Because the people that come to um, basically violate sovereignty of any, whether it's rape, whether it's looting or imperial. Now, here's the thing about the Babylonians. Yeah, the Babylonians, they were killing a lot of people and so on and so forth, but they were also learning from the costumes of the local. It's kind of like, hey, you go to a new place because there's gold there, for example. Amazing. It's not just a, if you're smart, you're not going to say there's gold there. The gold, what is the gold? How do people live there? What are their practices? But usually the combination of looting and basically gold mining has to do with areas where there are minerals, but people rape. And blame it on the rape. Even religions, monotheistic religions have it. Islam, for example, is one of its Achilles heels. Because in Islam, yeah, the times of Muhammad waiting for Aisha from turning 6 to 9, that's, but Epstein list is kind of like the same. They don't even wait for her to turn 9. When she turns 9, she could get pregnant, and then it's extortable. So they try until she turns 9, and people actually see that in the Talmud. It's not anti-Semitism. I'm actually trying to say, hey, if we denounce child predatory stuff, then we can alleviate persecution of Semitic people. And if we denounce slavery, then we have less risk of being exiled. And then we can make an income of something other than usury. I don't make an income of usury, but other people, they would work in the exchange, in the currency. Now, but Islam, they have a woman, for example, in many denominations, maybe denominations is a Christian word, I don't know. Woman has her own land, her own bank account. The husband cannot know of any of that, but they believe that a woman should dress in a certain way to not over. Also, the Jews believe that, and here's the thing. Let's talk about reason. Now, the lore of Arabic men, either is going to, and it works also for gay relationships. Let's say a woman is expected to wear, I don't know, not even a tent, okay? Because the man can't hold himself and so on and so forth. At what context can that woman take these clothes off, trusting that she will be able to orgasm because he will be able to manage his sexual energy in a way that can attune with her orgasmic flow? She needs to be safe. Now, here's the thing, we don't have to talk rape. Even the tempo. Now, for that to be, it's a body, mind, heart, and soul. Because there's also desire for connection, for presence. So, if he can't manage his sensual energy, it's going to affect persecution of Islam. Same with Jews. Now, if if there is, in some cultures there were big age gaps, then that would mean that the young infant, boy or girl, would not have a love that is actually loving. That nobody gave that to them. And then it can be the parentified child, which can create a lot of complexes. It begins with a partner that seems to be very caring, very loving, and then people say, what happened? They changed. Because there is a deeper thing that was not, there are many needs that try to meet themselves all at once. And nobody talks about them, and that gets complexes. So, yeah, with the fig tree leaf. There's an abundance of good things here. So, if we believe there's any such thing where a person makes a choice and that choice leads them to be raped, we're susceptible to invasion. But not just invasion, enslavement. This was the caveat for Abraham Hicks. And this is where a lot of manifestations fall flat. When you go, for example, even in places where they acknowledge rape, and you go, for example, to therapy and you say, okay, let's see how to make sure that it won't happen to you. That's a mindset that thinks that somebody can make choices that lead to them being raped. While in fact, the friction with this mindset is what makes people less susceptible to invasion. Because rape is not justified. And where rape is not justified, and here I'm saying not just not justified, because rape is the result of a rapist being a rapist. And the shadow work within is understanding that there's not a single thing that one can wear or not wear, or do or not do. And anything that would align with the frequency of the rapist is basically countering this belief. Now we're at the mundane time where it really, really profoundly matters. That beautiful, it's almost red purple color of the hibiscus tea with the fig tree leaves, where we see mainly the coloring of the hibiscus, this deep red. Probably I overboiled a little bit, but this is amazing. And I use the fresh hibiscus. Just wash it a little bit, and then boil it. Not boil, it's not supposed to be brought to a boil, but I was broadcasting anyway. That's the dual thing, and with Neptune in Mars sign, that's the duality of nothing. There is no choice that leads a person to be raped. Acknowledging that actually creates more friction with the frequency and the mindsets of the rapists that try to enforce a notion that somebody else made a choice that they and then that begin the slippery slope of justifying rape. Now, entire cultures, good cultures, completely discompounded at the face of this very notion. During COVID, my biggest issue, what I said, well, yeah, I need more space. People need a living space. But then there was a thought that I would agree with traffickers' mindset for housing. And I'm like, wait a second. I move out of a co-partnership, not co-partnership, cohabiting that became violent during COVID to say, okay, they need their space, I need my space. Now, of course, I run for my life, but I also say, hey, people need living space. All of that is true, and yet, them being violent is only attributed to them justifying sexual violence against women, at least to some degree. And this is also the shadow that made them susceptible to be mind controlled. Now, usually that roots at the place where they needed to feel powerful when they were raped, let's say, as a child, or by intelligence or something like that. Or something of that sort. Now, a society that believes that any type of choice, whether it's clothing, whether it's vocation, whether it's I don't know what. But here's the thing, sex work is not work. Why? Because the setting in sex work require for people to be in a situation where they're not actually ready, and that creates inflammation, which creates yeast, which creates anomalies in cancer growth, which creates both psychiatric, mental health, and physical health issues, which creates deaths, addictions, dissociation, and so on and so forth. And to begin with, indeed, people are tortured and kidnapped and trafficked and threatened. And this is also where we get into the duality. There is no choice of vocation that justifies person being raped. And there is no such thing as sex work. Now, what happens? A lot of people were in toxic relationships. They were in a certain setting. And this is where people begin to negate the oppressive. Now, in situations that are binding, there is a tendency of the binding to get worse and worse and worse, to cross a threshold. And that is where people became dissociated and desensitized. There would be escalation until they're no longer desensitized. And then they cannot tolerate what they could tolerate before. Even when I think about, 4.5 years I worked in McDonald's. And then there was issue with my iron, so I tried to eat meat, and then I needed to eat salad, and it wasn't possible. And then there was they wanted us to go up the rank, but then they would ask us for work unreasonable hours A, not safe hours for people alone, even men. And then, of course, there would be anomaly in my weight, and then what happened? No longer able to work. What I was dissociated and desensitized from crossed the threshold of escalation where there was no longer ability to work. Now, if we look at the structure of my bones, without that is not a structure of bones that will, even with all the holistic healing, probably ever be able to stand on the feet so many hours. But here's the thing: people with healthy feet, like my grandmother, that worked so many hours standing, began to develop vein problems. She was having nituach makafim, which is basically a very complicated surgery that people usually go through for the heart, in her feet, and a diabetes. This means that prolonged hours on our feet is incompatible as a job. I think Mr. Donald Trump had an issue also with standing on his feet. I'm not going to get into, but we also have to think about the requirement of, let's say, a politician or a public figure to stand prolonged hours on their feet. But they say, oh, what about waitressing? Many ways to solve that one. Definitely the barista that makes our morning coffee or tea doesn't. For example, I make a tea. I sit on the mattress. Is a mattress that is on the floor, and then I have basically the ability to boil the tea while I'm sitting, which makes sense. And in that way, I can cook. I was not able to cook for several years. There was not a social worker, but something of that sort. They would come to my house. They couldn't help me. For God forsaken, I don't know what weird policy. And I would find it difficult to cook because I would need to stand on my feet, which would be impossible. But everything required me standing, and even having a chair was too much of a small space. then I would run out of energy, let's say, to wash the dishes and so on and so forth. Now, what is the result? If we cannot cook, then we need to eat something. Well, we don't have money to buy actual food, then maybe some coffee with milk. So we won't be hungry. Then we don't get the nutrients. By the end of the first degree, I needed actually amphetamines prescribed. And those interfered with magnesium absorption, which interfered with sleep cycles. Now I have ritual abuse that interferes with sleep cycles. This is okay. This is zero sweeteners. It's one of the best tasting teas I ever had. Maybe it's the fig tree leaf. Wait a second.